Welcome in, everybody, to the JM Sports Show. I believe this might be, I could be wrong, I believe this might be episode 20, my 20th video, podcast, live stream, whatever on here. So I'm really excited, and this is something I teased a couple of weeks ago, but I'm now doing, and that is the future of sports. What will sports look like in 5 years, 5 to 10 years? So I'm talking 2028, on August 30th, 2028, what will sports look like? Now, 10 years to some isn't a long time, but in a way it is. And I say that because 10 years ago, Twitter was just 1 year old. Facebook wasn't at the level. I say that because 10 years ago, Twitter was just 1 year old. Facebook wasn't at the level it was at yet. It was only 4 years old. And MySpace was still the largest social media provider. YouTube was big. It had been bought by Google in 2006, so two years before then. But sports changed a lot too. In 2008, LeBron James still hadn't won an NBA title. It was only his fifth year in the league. Now he's won three, and he's on the Lakers, and he's 34 years old, and arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest player of all time. 10 years ago, Stephen Curry, the league's best shooter on the league's best team, was still in college. And the game of basketball hadn't yet taken the changes it's seen in the last couple of years, where it's much more like the three-pointers and the more wide open offenses and the kind of basketball we see now. Baseball was, we didn't have the power we have now, the power pitchers and the power hitters. It was starting to get there. And it was on the heels of the steroid era when you had a similar thing, but now we have it where it's seemingly natural, the ability of these athletes and how they are being utilized. In football, it was before the concussion controversy. The concussion controversy really came in the last 10 years. I was arguing right around 2011 when you had the suicide of Junior Seau, when you had the movie Concussion come out. Everybody does in 2012 or 2013. So that's relatively new. So 10 years, a lot can change. And so I'm thinking, how are sports gonna change in another 10 years? And in this modern society where technology is improved virtually every year, and where culturally we change, and where a bunch of things change, how is it that sports are going to change? I think it's a fascinating topic. So I'm going to go through several points and give reasons why sports are going to change. My first is that I think the NBA will leapfrog the NFL in popularity in the next 10 years. And the reasons for this, I think there's about 2 or 3 major reasons. One, the NFL has had a lot of controversies the last couple of years. Their biggest controversies have been the anthem protests last year and concussions. And I think the anthem protests more or less will go away within 2 or 3 years. I think certainly when Trump leaves office, whether that be in 2020 or 2024, there won't be really any more protests. And I think at this point, last year there was like 1 or 2 weeks where they were pretty massive, but by the end of the year, there actually weren't that many guys out there protesting. So I think the bigger issue is the concussion issue because that's actually impacted real rules in the NFL. We can think of this new helmet rule where you can't lead with the crown of your head, or you're subject to a 15-yard penalty, and there's potential severe fines and suspensions if there's multiple occurrences. Now, I think they've ironed out some of the little issues they had in the first 2 weeks of the preseason, but certainly there are going to be games and key games decided by this rule, much like the catch rule debacle that was last year. So the NFL has its issues. And not that the NBA doesn't, but I think the NBA's issues are much less severe. No one is stopping you don't have like huge reductions in the number of youths playing basketball like you do in football. Basketball's main problem is parity, which honestly I think that issue has been overblown. I think basketball has always been dominated by dynasties and by teams over a course of a decade. In the 2000s, it was the Spurs and the Lakers. In the 90s, it was the Bulls. In the 80s, it was the Lakers and the Celtics. In the 70s, it was the it was the Lakers and the Celtics had a few, and the Bucks had a few. And in the 60s, it was the Celtics and Lakers. So I don't think parity is a huge problem because generally the NBA has been a league that if you can get a few players together, you can become virtually unstoppable. And with the NBA and with basketball, it's just the nature of basketball. Basketball, out of the major four sports, is the smallest roster. It's a roster of 12 guys. And with the amount of money that they can pay these guys, because even though they have a salary cap, it's not like you pay like football where you might have a higher salary cap, but you still have to pay 52 guys to be on your roster, or 53. In basketball, you can pay, if you have the money, 2 or 3 stars and maybe get some guys on discount. Look at the Golden State Warriors, and that's basically what people are saying. Well, the Warriors have the best scoring point guard, the second best player potentially in Durant, the best power forward Draymond Green, one of the best shooting guards Klay Thompson, and he's their 5th best player potentially. And then they just got this great, one of the best centers in the league in DeMarcus Cousins, and people are freaking out. And my thing is, okay, the Warriors are dominating, but it's not, in 10 years, there's going to be a new team. There's going to be a new kid on the block. Potentially in 2 years. Like you just don't know how long dynasties are going to last. And the NBA success is predicated not on teams, but on individuals. It's a very player-friendly league. The faces of the league aren't teams anymore. Lakers haven't, they have LeBron now, but they haven't been good the previous 5 years, 5 to 6 years. The Bulls haven't been good in a long time. The Celtics are just getting good after the first half of the decade. They were okay. So it's built on players. It's built on the Durants. It's built on the LeBrons. It's built on the Hardens, the Currys, the Damian Lillards, what have you. It's built on stars. They get their own shoes. They get their own brands. I mean, Jordan brand is still one of the biggest athletic wear brands, period. There's football teams that now wear Jordan in college. You have Michigan and I believe Ohio State wears Jordan now. So there's teams that wear Jordan gear that don't even play basketball. That's how big Michael Jordan became, and he's been retired for 20 years. So basketball is predicated on the success of individual players. And since it's a player-friendly league, and with social media, the players have more voice. They're much more improved than they were a few years ago. Um, you also have you also have uh, the fact that on social media, NBA tends to dominate because its audience skews younger. Football's audience is a bit more spread out, but it's starting to get older. Baseball's audience is much older. Hockey is kind of a niche. It's popular among a lot of ages, but mainly in certain parts of the country, in the northern parts of the country, and in Canada. So basketball is popular in a lot of areas. It's popular among young people, and it has a good social media presence. One of the best of the big four sports. Um, so I think those are the reasons you're going to see the NBA become more popular than the NFL in 10 years. Now, second big thing that's happened, and this happened in the last 6 months, was sports betting became legal. The Supreme Court said that states can decide whether or not to legalize sports. And already my state, New Jersey, um, which actually led the case, said, "Yeah, we'll legalize gambling." I believe New York is legalized gambling as well. California, I think, is working on it. I believe like Mississippi or Alabama. So there's already several states that have legalized sports gambling and have the books and casinos set up just in time for two of the most popular sports to bet on, and that is the NFL and college football. You have now networks that are trying to think how they're going to address betting. Now, CBS just came out and said they're not going to have lines this year and deal with lines and odds and all that, but that could change. I mean, when fantasy sports first started, I don't think people envisioned that there would be such an industry and such a focus where you have on your bottom lines on pretty much every network, you're the top fantasy scorers of the league. And they have them ranked by position and all that. And there's fantasy football shows, and there's fantasy football. There was a fictionalized show made about fantasy football, The League, which ran on FXX for like 7 seasons. So, um, it's become part of the culture. And betting, which even when it was illegal, quote unquote, was still done. I mean, people still had office pools for March Madness. They still had, you still had offshore accounts. You could still go to Vegas where it was actually legal. So people bet on sports already, but now all that money can come to the leagues, and leagues can set it up with potentially in the jurisdictions where it is legal, where you can have betting stations inside the stadiums or have partnerships with casinos. It's happened in Europe where sports gambling is legal, where soccer teams wear jerseys with the sponsors on them, and some of those sponsors are online bookies. Like some teams, I think I bet like Bet365, and there's a literal casino on the front of their jersey. So that's happened in Europe, and maybe NBA, you'll see DraftKings or a Bovada or whatever book sponsor a team and set up the infrastructure needed in stadiums to where you could be at the game live and be betting on the games. And also, networks are going to approach it, again, much the same way as fantasy, where they're going to have shows about betting. Fox Sports already announced that they're going to have a show with Carissa Thompson, Brent Musburger, Todd Furman, and Clay Travis, and it's going to air 4:30 to 5:30 Eastern on FS1. So Fox is already investing heavily in a primetime hour into a sports betting show. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see, especially over this next year, but certainly over 5 to 10 years, the industry that sports gambling will have as more and more states legalize it. It's kind of like the legalization of marijuana and the economy it has created with marijuana tourism becoming a thing in the states where it's legal, like Colorado and Washington, where you go there and they have shops and tours and you sample the different types of marijuana. And it could be very much the same where states like New Jersey and the states that really lead the way on this get a lot of tourism. Like people now in New York, they're not going to have to fly 5 hours to go bet on the Super Bowl legally. They can just drive the 20 minutes or whatever across the bridge, and you could set up casinos literally right on the border, like right in Hudson County or right in Camden County or on the shore at Monmouth Racetrack, where people can go and bet, and that would do wonders for the tourism there. So I'm very interested in seeing how betting and sports gambling in this industry grows. Number number three, the number three change. So in 2026, we have the World Cup. The World Cup is coming to the United States, uh, which is very exciting, and was great news for U.S. soccer that this year was at a bottom point because the team missed the Russia World Cup. So I think soccer is going to kind of have its heyday in popularity and become a very, very popular sport, and it already is. I work at a school part time, and I see kids now, just as many kids that are wearing the Odell jerseys and the LeBron jerseys. There's now a good contingent that wear Messi and Ronaldo jerseys, that wear soccer jerseys, that actively cheer for soccer teams in Europe. So imagine if those players would have come to the U.S. and somehow, for about 10 years now, we've had legendary players from Europe come and play their final few years in the United States. And the MLS, as a result, has been able to expand rapidly and do quite well in certain markets. In LA, they now have two teams. In Seattle, the Seattle Sounders are a huge part of that community. Atlanta FC has had a tremendous amount of success in that city, where people usually thought of it as more of a football city. And so soccer is expanded, and then you're going to get the World Cup in, and the kind of grouchy old guy that's like, oh, soccer's dumb, is kind of disappearing. And you see the success of even a World Cup the U.S. wasn't in for Fox Sports. I think it's going to be a tremendous impact to have it here, to have the MLS expand. And again, as youth participation rates in football decline, maybe soccer takes up that slack. Already, it's one of the most, if not, I believe it is the most popular youth sport. So maybe now they can come in and instead of quitting it in 8th grade when they go to play football, maybe they play it in high school. I don't know. FIFA, the video game that EA Sports makes, is hugely popular, especially among kids. And so they learn the names of the players, and that's how they become fans. And that goes back to what I was saying. At the school, kids wear soccer jerseys. And I think a big part of it is the FIFA video game. Is it exposes these stars to kids. And I think Ronaldo is just as cool as LeBron, which the rest of the world thinks. But in the United States, soccer stars weren't as big as football, basketball, and baseball stars. So I think soccer in 10 years will be more popular um, uh, than well, not more popular, but will have a popularity where it could compete as a potentially as a big five sport with hockey, baseball, basketball, and football. Sports streaming. This is already a huge industry. Again, it's something we've seen. ESPN with ESPN Plus, um, YouTube TV. A lot of YouTube TVs advertising centers around here's our sports coverage. We have MLB, we have Fox, we have NFL, we have ESPN. We have these partnerships, and you don't have to pay. You can pay $30 or whatever it is a month instead of $100 a month for the cable company, and you can get all these sports channels you like. Amazon is now in their second year distributing Thursday night football, Thursday night games for the NFL. Before that, Twitter had it. Before that, Yahoo had it. We're in about our fourth or fifth year where the sports are streaming online. The NFL is. The leagues have set up themselves paid subscription services, MLB.tv, which I have, and NBA League Pass, where you can buy access and watch the games out of market. So as cord cutting continues, people are still going to watch sports, but they're going to watch it in a very different way. And I think it'd be huge if a company like Netflix came in or Hulu came in and actually invested in sports streaming. I think that would be huge, and I think that would really be a big disruptor to the industry. But I think a big part of it is the costs are going to have to come down, and maybe the leagues come down to meet these streaming services, because as the cable companies start to potentially go out, the streaming services might command a bit more respect and get the prices they want from the leagues. Because right now, Monday Night Football on ESPN, which is one game a week, ESPN has to pay $1.2 billion a year for one game a week. One game. And it usually isn't even the best game anymore. So for one game a week, ESPN, which has lost a lot of subscribers in the past couple of years, has to pay that much to the NFL. And the other stations do have to pay a lot too. It could be a serious challenge that for the streaming teams. The Portland Trailblazers I saw this week, they have this streaming service where they're going to let fans pick the games. They have a streaming service that broadcasts 35 games a year, and this year the fans will get to vote via poll what game they want to see. I think let's see, this is fifth point, I believe. NCAA football men's basketball players will get paid in the next 10 years. I think we saw this huge controversy and scandal in March with the Adidas and the assistant coaches from Arizona, Auburn, Oklahoma State, and USC all got caught as part of this scheme, as part of this scandal. And there were actually criminal charges. Like, it was the FBI. It wasn't just the NCAA. It was the Federal Bureau of Investigation got involved. And it was a years-long investigation, and this is what they came up with. And Sean Miller of U of A got involved, and all that. Like, it got crazy. It got insane to see what happened there with the scandal there. And I think it really raised the pressure even more to a fever pitch about having to pay players, because for several years it's been an issue. Like, South Park did an episode on it where they kind of likened the non-payment of players, especially for the likenesses in video games, to slavery. And Cartman, he's trying to figure out a way. He set up his own sports league, and he's trying to figure out a way to not pay his players. So he goes to the University of Colorado dressed as a slave owner, and basically he's like, well, how do we do this? And the guy's like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So he's like, oh, well, student athletes. We don't pay our student athletes. And then Cartman's like, oh, student athletes. And it is really funny. And that was several years ago. And now the pressure is even more on the NCAA to do something. And already we've seen the decision with EA Sports that they have to compensate the athletes money for their likenesses being used. So if NCAA were to ever come back and they were to use the likenesses again, the players would have to receive a stipend for that. So I think in the next 10 years, we're actually going to see it where players receive a bit because you can have pressure from startup leagues, like you saw. I know it wasn't a huge success, but LeVar Ball set up the JBA. And also the NBA and NFL might say, you might not need that age requirement anymore to come in. If you're good enough to come in to our professional league, you can't. Because in no other business, no other entertainment business is do you have to go to college? Like if you're a great singer like Taylor Swift, you don't have to go spend a year at the University of Tennessee before you can start doing selling albums. If you're successful and good, you can sell albums as young as you want. Like Michael Jackson was selling albums with the Jackson 5 at 5 years old. So there's no other industry or there's no other portion of the entertainment industry, which sports falls under, where you have to uh, wait to get paid. If you're a good actor as a kid, you can get paid. If you're a good singer, you can get paid. So I think and in other sports like baseball and hockey, you could be drafted at 18 years old and be paid then. I had a friend who got drafted 1 overall in baseball, and he's 20 now, and he's driving a Maserati, and that's cool because he worked hard on his craft, and he deserves to get paid in that way. So I think we'll see the same in the NBA. We'll see probably that elimination of that rule, and as a result, the NCAA, in order to stay competitive, will have to pay the athletes. Startup football leagues. You have 2 leagues that are going up against the NFL in the next 2 years. You have the Alliance of American Football, which Charlie Ebbsall starting with Peter Thiel, the Chernin Group, which owns Barstool Sports, and some NFL players like Jared Allen. They're coming in next year, and they already announced where their teams are going to be. They're going to be in San Diego, Phoenix, Salt Lake City, San Antonio, Memphis, Birmingham, Atlanta, and Orlando. So as you can see, only 2 cities, Phoenix and Atlanta, they actually have an NFL team, and they're going to be competing in spring. League's going to start up right after the Super Bowl next year, and so they're going to try and be that success as we've seen the NFL have its issues, and they have some great head coaches already. Steve Spurrier's going to have a team. Brad Childress, Tim Lewis, Mike Singletary, Rick Neuheisel, Dennis Erickson, Mike Riley, and Mike Martz, all coaches who have been successful either in the NFL or college, are all going to be coaching in this league. And then, of course, the XFL, which was actually announced earlier, but it's going to start later. It's going to start in 2020. It's coming back, and its big promise is we're not going to have the protests the NFL has, and we're going to simplify the rules, and there's going to be no players with criminal records on our roster. Now, I think the AAFL, just because it's starting earlier, might have a little bit of an advantage, and the risk now is since both are forming and both are going to have the same season, that they kind of dilute each other's product. But it's very interesting to see that this has been a time, not since the 80s have we seen a league try and go up against the NFL with the USFL, and here we are with 2 potentially trying that. And if you get a player like Terrell Owens, who I know has been interested in playing, or Kaepernick, or Manziel, or Tebow, you could really draw some interest in from fans, as well as if, hey, who knows? You do what I just said. Maybe you grab a great high school guy out of high school who wants to play. If you don't have those age restrictions that the NFL does, and you could be sort of like grabbing a player out of college. So depending on how you do, and you have these great coaches, it could very well be successful. And I think at least one of them is gonna last and succeed. I'm betting on the AAFL right now just because they're coming in sooner, and they have a team in San Diego, so they kind of got to my heart. But it's going to be very interesting to see how they learn from the NFL's mistakes and problems, and if they can avoid some of the pitfalls that startup leagues have had in the past. I think here are several just quick little predictions. MLB, I think we've seen their ratings decline. I think it'll plateau. I think it'll flatten out. It's still going to be down. I don't think it's ever going to go up, their ratings. But I think it'll plateau. I think it'll kind of hit like this new average. It's kind of that third most popular sport. But it doesn't have the problems the NFL has. It has some problems, but I think they're kind of, again, overblown. I think if you provide a good product, people will watch. The rise of power bats and arms in the MLB isn't going to go away anytime soon. The Red Sox have built around it. The Yankees, a lot of teams have built around that. The NFL will play a Super Bowl in London, or at least try. I think London will be considered. You've seen them play now 2 or 3 games a year there. So if they don't have a team there by then, I think they'll at least maybe try a Super Bowl, maybe at first the Pro Bowl, and try and expand to London that way by really playing a marquee game there. The Chargers will move back to San Diego. I think the LA experiment failed. I don't see it really doing well. It hasn't done well so far, and there were some rumors last year the NFL might do it. So if they can't draw interest, and if the Rams continue to dominate, the NFL might decide, it's not worth having a team here. 2 teams here in LA. Let's try in San Diego. I think that to succeed in San Diego, they need to get rid of the Spanos. They need to force this sell there. And I think the political stances by athletes will continue. So I think players like Kaepernick and LeBron will continue to create that controversy by being political, just because they are really helped by a very sympathetic sports media. I'm actually going to get into that in a future episode, the politicization of sports. I think it's a very fascinating topic. So there are my general predictions. My big ones are NBA surpassing the NFL, sports betting expanding and turning into a billion-dollar legitimate industry, the rise of soccer as a premier sport in the United States, where was I? NCAA streaming becoming more part of the game, and and becoming the main way people consume sports, and the NCAA paying players. And then obviously having to look and see the success of startup football, you see AAFL and the XFL, and seeing which one will succeed. I'm right now saying the AAFL because it's coming in next year. It's going to have that year advantage, and it already has the teams established even today. And then also some of the little predictions I had as well at the end here. So I think it will be very interesting to see how sports evolve over the next 5 to 10 years. It's been an episode I've been looking forward to producing. I did some research and really worked on it. On top of my normal episodes, the ones I did on the NFL and on the NBA and on the college football. So I hope you guys subscribe, because this is what the channel is going to be like. It's going to be really cool discussions about sports, both broad topics like today's and predictions like we've had with the NFL and college football, and then just general episodes where I react to sports news like what I've done in the past as well. So I'm having a lot of fun with this. I hope that you guys are having fun watching it. Subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at JMoney18C. And be sure to, which I put it in the chat there. So thank you everyone for watching. I want to really encourage you guys to subscribe. I'm thanking my subscribers. I have about 10 right now, so it's very fun to see my channel grow. And I'll see you guys next time when we discuss more about the world of sports. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night.